let's talk about now some techniques that we've done with our athletes, or that you've done specifically with the
Or
office
before
with your
before
athletes. Uh-huh.
before we go into that, I mean, I just want to touch on the Simone Biles thing that you mentioned. I think it was a great point because
Hmm.
you know I think on those stages with Naomi and Simone, I think on those stages being able to advocate for their mental health, I think that was huge, right? I think obviously
Yeah.
they both got a lot of backlash, and they both got a
Yes.
lot of criticism saying they need to do this. This is their job to do this, and they train for this and whatever. But I think people forget the human side of the human element of everything, right? They're still humans. Yes, this is what they do. This is what they've trained to do, but that's not entirely who they are, right? And there's other
Hmm.
things that kind of go into that, right? And I think it's important. I love the fact that they stood up and be able to advocate for themselves, because it's really hard to do that in those spaces when all the eyes are watching you, right?
Right.
Training for 4 years, right? Think how they're training for 4 years for this one specific event, right? That they know is coming up, and being able to say like, hey, I'm not in the best position to help my team succeed. you know some people use the word brave, some people use courageous, whatever it might be, but regardless of what you call it, it's still difficult to do, right? To be able
Yeah.
to say like, I'm not be able to help my team the best I can right now. And so
Hmm.
think about how much must be going on if you've trained, you've dedicated your life, you've invested so much time, energy, blood, sweat, tears, fill in the blank, and then think of how difficult it, how bad things might have been potentially. Like, again, I don't know her specifically, but
Right.
for her to be able to say, hey, I need to take a step back because I can't handle this right now, right? And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and this is nothing new, right? And I think that's
Hmm.
why some of the criticism, I think sometimes the criticism is unfair, just because you look at someone like Michael Jordan, right? He's considered one of the greatest players of all time. All right. If you go to any room, bar, stadium, you say who's the top three players, guarantee you most of them are saying Michael Jordan, right?
Yeah.
And so he even took a step away in the prime of his career, saying like, hey, I got to take a step away from this, right? Being on all the time is difficult, right?
Yeah.
Seeing your
Yeah.
face on a billboard and then walking out your apartment or walking out your house, and then you still having to be on all the time is tough, right?
Hmm.
Coming back into your apartment, having to censor yourself all the time, and not being able to have like authentic conversations all the time, it's tough,
Right.
right? Like,
Yeah.
so imagine you going home from work, right? And then the second you leave work, you're still working. The second you get home, you're still working, right? You go to
Yeah.
sleep, to live, and then you wake up and you're working again, right?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's something that's really difficult for everyone to understand, right? And so,
Hmm.
again, what happened with Naomi and Simone is nothing new. I mean, athletes we've some of the best, like I said, Michael Jordan, some of the best athletes in the world that
Hmm.
you can't really there's no real blemish on their career.
Right.
They've kind of dealt with some of those things too. So I think it's important for people to just to give them some grace, and try to understand, right? Understand where they're
Hmm.
coming from, and what's going on in their lives.
And I could describe that too as one word: stress. you know
Hmm.
all of these things cause stress, and in our everyday lives we have stress, be it a family member that's sick, right, that you have to take care of, or be it now with COVID, being stressed out that, man, I can't go to the grocery store feeling 100% confident that I'm not going to get sick. Yeah, you could take precautions, you could wear your mask, you get your vaccine, you can do all of these things, right? But that stress is still there, all of these things, right? So let's talk a little bit about things that people could do to manage stress, right? Be it workplace stress, be it with family, be it with the environment, right? And the global pandemic that we're dealing with right now. Give us a little bit of, a few tips so we could deal with when it comes to stress and just mental well-being.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you're some people might not love my answer, because it always depends, right? Especially with mental health and psychology, it depends on who you are, depends on your environment, depends on your situation. But you're right, everybody deals with stress and everybody handles it a different way.
Right.
I think if I was to boil it down, I think the first thing I would say is try to understand yourself, right? Understand what your stressors are. Are they stressors related to relationships, stressors related to your physical health, stressors related to your emotions, or whatever it might be. Understand where your stressors are. That way they're not like popping out of nowhere and surprising you, and then that all of a sudden you're not able to kind of control that
Right.
or regulate that very well. So again, so just understanding where your stressors are, and then we kind of touched on a little bit, kind of building a support system, right? Having people around you that can help on you, that can check in on you like realistically, like honestly, authentically checking on you. When you say, hey, how you doing, man? And you say, oh, I'm good. They're like, are you really? Like, what's going on? Like, those kind of conversations, not the, hey, are you good? Yeah, I'm good. And, keep it moving type of thing. But people you can actually kind of talk to and kind of unload if you need to, or people who are there to support you, right? People who are able to do like, some of the tangible things that you might not be able to do when you're going through it, like, doing the dishes, helping you with laundry, or, bringing you, some cupcakes or some food or some, whatever it might be, right? Something that's going to help you out. But, and then also I think, creating coping mechanisms that you can actually use and activate, right? So, I think one of the things that I like to do personally, but also, kind of, help others kind of start that is breathing techniques, controlling your breathing, right? You can speak to the physiological side of this a little bit better, but when you're stressed, one of the things that start happening is your heart starts to beat a little faster. You start to, palpitations, you start to sweat, you start to get tense. And one of the things you can do is your breathing becomes irregular. And so one of the things you can do is kind of control your breathing, right? So being aware that your breathing is like shallow, because once it's shallow, that means, your body needs to breathe a little bit faster, a little bit more to be able to get enough oxygen.
Hyperventilate. Yeah. And
you start to hyperventilate. Yeah. Right. Yeah, exactly. And people don't recognize that or realize that stuff's happening in the moment. But that's what your body's doing. So one, being able to aware of that. And so once you can actually be aware that that's happening and control your breathing, even just taking like a deep breath, like when you need it, right? I think people underestimate the power of just like stopping and just okay, right, and kind of doing that. And so like, this thing called box breathing, where you take a breath in for 4 seconds, hold for 4, release for 4, hold for 4, and then repeat. It's an easy skill that anyone can start practicing. But once you start to employ that on a more regular basis, it's something that you can realize, like you can physically see the difference of when you start doing that, when you're getting really stressed. Right. So when that stress is trying to start, once you understand what your stressors are, you realize like, okay, every time I talk to Danny, my blood starts to boil a little bit. So when you see Danny, all of a sudden you're like, okay, let me try this breathing technique and kind of calm yourself down before you get to the point where, you can't regulate it anymore. Right. And so I think that's a really big one that I like to use. I think,
and that's to add to that, if you have an Apple Watch, there's a breathing, app, right?
Yeah, there is. Yeah.
It may seem dumb to people, for me at least, it became a little bit annoying because it always gave me reminders. Hey, sit down and breathe for a second. It's like, I can't right now. I'm busy. I'm doing things. But that just goes to show you how, like, even the technology that we wear notices differences, right? On how, hey, your heart rate's really high right now, and it seems like you're just sitting down. Well, something's going on. Yeah, you could be stressed out. You could be going through something. You got some bad news, whatever it may be. But that's just that simple reminder of like, hey, just breathe real quick.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like I think when people initially, and I get a lot of pushback on this, even still. Initially, when I say like, hey, let's try breathing for a second, it's like I am breathing. It's like I hear you.
Yeah,
you are. But let's try doing it this way for a second, right? And I think, like to your point, where a lot of times people, in everyday life just say like, I'm too busy to stop, right? It doesn't have to be a whole meditation, like, woosah moment. It can just be literally 30 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, or just one cycle of just, box breathing, where you breathe, hold for 4, breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4, hold for 4. Like, do that once, right? I think it doesn't have to be this whole ritual or whole routine, right? Doing that once can still provide some benefits, right? And so, when you get that alert on your phone, on your watch or whatever, it says, hey, you good? You need to breathe. You need to breathe for a second. It's like, it doesn't need to be a whole, like, I can't do that right now. It's like, okay, let me just breathe for like 10 seconds and get back to what I'm doing, right? And people will definitely notice the difference between that.
And just bouncing off of that, it's all of these things affect everything, right? They affect your work life. One of the most important things that they affect is your sleep patterns, right? I've had a lot of people tell me, hey, I'm not sleeping well. I'm not, I slept only about 4 hours last night. I slept terrible. I kept bouncing and turning. And then you ask them, well, are you stressed out? They're like, well, no, it's just my regular day. But that's the thing. People don't realize how stressful a work day could be, right? And they don't realize how important just taking that you time, right? Be it by yourself, be it with family. You're the second guest that I have, and you're the second guest in a row to tell me, hey, you need to have a support system, right? It's huge. A support system doesn't only help you nutritionally, which is what we talked about in the first episode. It helps you out in the mental health side of things. And I'm more than likely and pretty sure that it's going to help you out on the physical side of things too, right? The support 100%. System is huge, be it your family, be it your friends, whoever it may be.
Yeah, and so you touched on like again, support system. It's critically important. I think we underestimate that, and even someone like myself, like I consider myself super independent and super like I don't need anybody. I'll do it by myself type of
Hmm.
thing. Like you have to have a support system, right? It
Hmm.
doesn't mean someone you're calling every single day and like unloading, but it has to be people who you can rely on and depend on.
Absolutely.
Um, but to go back, like you touched on sleep, and I think people underestimate the power of sleep and what it does for your body. Like physically, like your body needs to sleep. It needs to recover. It needs to regenerate, right? Your body will break down faster. Like sometimes people try to overtrain, and your body will break down faster if you're not getting enough sleep, right?
Yeah.
And the same way with your brain is the same way. Like your brain you will start losing, executive functioning, cognitive functioning if you don't get enough sleep, right? And so I think people underestimate that. And so, I had someone recently, reach out and was like, hey, well, my brain is just on before I go to bed, right?
Yep. Yep.
And so, already know, like turn your phones off, don't try not to watch TV, have a dark room, things like that for when they're sleeping. But one of the things that one of the techniques that I like to use personally, and I like to tell people is it's what's called cognitive offloading before you go to bed. So, your brain is ruminating on the things that you think that you're worried, anxious, concerned about, or things that you have to do, right? So
Mhm.
like when you go to bed, when you can't stop your brain from thinking, part of that is because your brain is like, I can't forget these things. I don't want to forget these things. These things are important. These things
Yeah.
need attention. And so cognitive offloading is similar to journaling. Again, I get a lot of pushback from when I say the word journaling. People think like,
Yeah.
hey, I don't want to, I'm not writing a diary. It's like, listen, this is gonna be that serious.
Yeah.
Cognitive offloading is literally just before you go to bed, write down the things that are the most important things that happened that day, the things that you need to remember for tomorrow, the things that
Hmm.
are kind of a concern. Again, you're putting it down on a piece of paper, so that way you can say to yourself, hey, I put it down. When I wake up, these are the things that I need to kind of get done today. These are the things that happened yesterday that need to be addressed today. These are the things that are most concerned moving forward. That way your brain can be like, okay, I'm not going to forget those things. Those things are there. So when I wake up in the morning, it's there for me to pick back up where I left off and hit the ground running. Right. So that
Absolutely.
actually helps a lot of people to be able to like, okay, this is my time to sleep. It tells your brain, this is your time to sleep. This is your time to
Hmm.
relax. We've got it taken care of. Like, again, it takes practice. It's something that, takes time, but give it a try. Like literally tonight before you go to bed, if you're like on the pillow, like with your eyes wide open and you're just like, I can't stop these thoughts, like write those things down and tell yourself, hey, I'll come back this tomorrow. All right, take a deep breath again, and then try to go to sleep. Right. So that's another
Yeah.
tip, another trick or whatever you want to call it that people can use.